Hey guys, it's Solbyte, and today we're going to be going over constructors, which is part of my new object-oriented programming series, where we are going to go over the basics of object-oriented programming with classes and etc. So today we're going to be going over constructors. So first, I want to kind of recap a little bit one of my last points in my last video. That being, what happens if we don't assign anything to this user1 object here? What would happen if we just, created the object and then printed the information of that object? What exactly would it print? So we're going to go ahead and compile this and then run it. And here we can see we get name blank and age 2. So clearly this is, I didn't specify age 2 anywhere here, so clearly we don't exactly want this kind of thing to happen. And what we're seeing here is actually something from the compiler. So if you don't create a default constructor, which I'll go over here in just a second, then the compiler actually has a default constructor and assigns the values however it sees. And so it can be kind of random at times. It can have a lot to do with specific values and whatever specific memory address this object is in. And you can get random values like, for instance, age 2. So, but this is a product of the default constructor that is automatically built for each object of a class, and it is dictated by your compiler. So, but obviously we don't exactly wish for this to happen, especially if you want to, let's say, create an object before getting the information of what is going to be, the attributes of that object. Like what is, whenever a user is created, maybe we want to create the user and then allow the user to actually fill in these attributes here, like it's like their name and their age. So when it comes to the actual definition of a constructor is basically just a method that builds the object with the attributes that you want it to, if that makes sense. You can kind of think of a constructor as like the builder of an object, the same way that I said that a class is basically the blueprint for creating an object. You could think of the constructor as the builder, and that builder is in the form of a method. So let's go ahead and actually create one, and before that I want to bring up two pretty important facts about a constructor. One, unlike other methods which will have a return type, a constructor does not have a return type. So that's just one kind of unique thing about constructors. They will not need a return type for whatever reason. And the second fact is that the constructor will have the name of the actual class. So for instance, the constructor name will just be user. And just like that, we've built a constructor. This is our new constructor. Right now, this is actually in the form of a default constructor because there are no values here, but let's just make a normal constructor that will build the object with the correct values. So let's say that we want to pass in the values to assign to the user's name and the user's age. So let's put string name and int age. So now I'm going to assign the name. In fact, actually, I kind of messed this up here. Sorry about that. These need to be different variable names compared to the actual attributes name of the user class. This is because we're going to be assigning the actual value, the actual attribute that's in the object, to whatever parameter we want to pass into this constructor. So very important. Sorry about that little mistake there, but we'll do that for both of these. And just like that, we've built a constructor. So how do we actually see this now? How do we go about this? So as you can see, there's actually now a red line here indicating an error, and it says that no default constructor exists for class user. And that is because we already created a constructor, the compiler will no longer use its own default constructor. So how do we actually, use this now? How do we use this constructor to build our object? So what we'll do is we'll set it equal to the constructor, and then we will pass in some values. So the first parameter is the name, and the second is going to be the age. So let's pass in Solbyte, and then do 22. All right, perfect. So now whenever we run this program and use the print info method that we have defined in the class, we should be able to see the correct information. Just like that, we do. So perfect. So this is just a normal constructor, but I want to show what happens if we just kind of want to keep it like this. What if, for whatever reason in your code, you don't want to, wait until you have all of the information about what will be in that object, what attributes the object might have, and then make it? What if you want to make the object first and then allow values to be put in later through the form of like a mutator method, which we'll get into in a later video, the different types of methods like accessors and mutators. So, but for now, let's just say that we want to just create a object with default values. So we'll create what is called a default constructor, different from like a normal constructor. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll just have it basically have no values, no parameters here, and we will just fill in what we want the values to be by default if nothing is defined. So let's just put the name as NA, and we will make the age -1. Perfect. So now the red line has disappeared, and let's go ahead and check, because now we're using the default constructor. We haven't, passed in any parameters, nothing like that. So this user1 should now have these values by default. So let's go ahead and try to run this and just kind of see what we can see here. Look at that. Name, NA, and age -1. So yeah, constructors are very handy, and they can look a lot more complicated with the more, however many attributes you have. And they're a really nifty way to avoid any sort of weird memory overflow errors that could come about from using the default constructor from the compiler. So constructors are very handy for whenever maybe you just want to create the object before putting any values into it, or if you want to create the object and properly put in the correct attributes based on either user input or just whatever attributes or parameters you want to pass into it. So anyways, with that being said, next video I plan to go over encapsulation, and yeah, if you guys have any questions or other comments, please let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, thank you for watching.